Just let us know, Lily, thanks. I think so. Are we ready to go? Yes, we are. Okay, let's call the meeting to order. How about if folks take their seats? Just by way of a little bit of housekeeping we have this, could you take your seats, please? Thanks. A little housekeeping that we have going on here is that Senate File 47, Board of Trustees, Systems of Public Recreation Amendment. It's my understanding that that bill has been withdrawn, is no longer an active bill, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we won't be taking up that one today. So we only have to finish up Senate File 111 and then take up Senate Joint Resolution 4. So with that, I think, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Landon, if you wouldn't mind taking this ship, and I'll go sit in the audience on the first one, since it's so controversial. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Again, this is Senate File 111, net metering revisions. And if you'll recall, on Friday, we had taken some testimony and promised that we would resume testimony from anyone who would like to come forward and testify on Senate File 111. Just for edification, Lily, do we have anyone streaming in who wishes to testify this morning on 111?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we will get to those folks here in a minute. Want to make sure that there's no one else in the room. We're in public testimony on Senate File 111. We've already walked through. Please come forward. We have walked through the bill and we'll have the sponsor come back up and refresh our memories after we take some testimony this morning. So welcome. Nice to see you. Please introduce yourself and for the record. And
my name is Denise Parrish. It's like the siren call because my name came up on Friday, I believe. So I decided I'd better show up. I am a retired state employee, currently private citizen, and I worked 42 years in the utility regulation industry. So.
well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
To the state of Wyoming.
Thank
Was it
you.
all in Wyoming?
Almost 30 years of it was here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Welcome, Denise. Good to see you.
I just wanted to confirm some of the things that were said on Friday about how utility rate making works, is that a number of people seem to think that if some customer class or group of customers underpays, that is the utility's problem. That is not how it works, because the utility rates are set to allow the companies, the utilities, to collect all of their costs, that they would have an opportunity to collect all of their costs. If some customer class is not paying their share of the cost, those are then paid or established for payment by other classes of customers. So it's not like if the net metering customers underpay that it's the utility, it has a shortfall. No. Other customers then overpay relative to what their costs would be. I am in favor of this bill because it sends the decision-making on what those rates should be to the experts in the state, which is the Public Service Commission. It's very unusual to have rate making spelled out so specifically in law the way it is right now, rather than taking the testimony and the experts and the data that will change from time to time and sending it to the agency whose job it is to look at all that and establish those rates. And that's essentially what this bill does, is say it should go back to the Public Service Commission to determine what the appropriate compensation is. There was an argument I heard made, which surprised me a little bit in the Friday testimony, that the commission would not have jurisdiction. That would be a very unusual position to take, because these are the rates to be paid, and that is the commission's job. That's what they do, is establish the rates that the customers are to pay and the compensation that is to go to the utilities. So with that, I won't take any more of your time, but I would be happy to take any questions. And I just think this is really much better than what is currently in law, where the legislature is setting a sort of across-the-board, never-to-change compensation system, rather than allowing the experts to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Parrish. It's good to see you this morning. Thanks for taking the time to come in. Any questions? Senator Steinmetz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here. And I'm fairly new to all this, so I'm getting my mind wrapped around it. But I see, as we talked about last week, that this only applies to new customers after January 1, 2026. So do you know how much inequity is in the system now? And I mean, we'll just be leaving that in place the way it is now, and this would just be going forward. So how do you see that working?
Ms. Parrish, go ahead.
Through you, Senator, I see it as a compromise in order to not exacerbate the inequities that are, because as more and more, under the current system, as more and more net metering customers are added, or small generator customers, I think it's defined in the bill, but as those customers are added, it would just worsen the situation. There have been many attempts to fix it for all customers, and without any success. And so, because this bill has been before the legislature many times, and hours and hours and hours of committee time talking about this unsuccessfully. So it's not ideal, it's not perfect in that regard, in that it grandfathers existing customers, but I do think that life is full of compromises, and this is another one of those.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. Senator Dockstader,
A little
go
more
ahead.
follow-up, Ms. Parrish, on the, you have concerns on the grandfathering part? Is that what I caught just now?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Senator, I was simply responding to what the effect of having the grandfathering is that I'm not particularly concerned about the grandfathering, because I think that is perhaps the only way to stop the bleeding and not make it worse.
Anything else, committee? Ms. Parrish, thanks again. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And glad you're well, and appreciate you taking time.
Enjoying retirement. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I bet. That's awesome. Anyone else in the room like to come forward? Please come forward. Absolutely. And for those streaming in, we will get to you folks as soon as we get those who are in the room this morning. We're taking testimony on Senate File 111, the net metering revisions bill. Welcome. Good morning. Can you please introduce yourself for the record? And if you get good and close to the microphone, that really helps our folks who are streaming in. So-
Okay, can you hear me now? Sorry about
Absolutely.
that. Obviously, I don't do this very much.
Yeah. Can you say your name again for us?
My name's Ted Hanlon.
Thank you, Ted. Appreciate that.
I've been in the fossil energy business in Wyoming for 45 years. So it might kind of surprise you to know that I helped write the first net metering law in Wyoming and had Senator McGraw introduce it for us in 2001. When we introduced that bill and then passed the law, one of the things that I was very proud of at the time was that Robert Tarantola, who was an executive for Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power, testified for the bill. I've always felt like that was a demonstration that it was a pretty fair bill. The way I understand, at least the way we wrote it in 2001, what customers get back from the utility is the avoided cost rate, which is set by law. The avoided cost rate means that obviously the utility has to pay their workers, they have to pay for their infrastructure, whether somebody generates small power or not. The only thing they avoid is the fuel, really, that it cost them to generate the power. And that's all the customer gets back, is that avoided cost. So I've always thought that worked pretty well. And it's worked since 2001, right? So it's very hard for me to understand why we try to keep making this more complicated every couple of years. I mean, this has worked for a long time now. I think there are some things that could be done that would help the people that want to do small power generation. It would help the people that work for that are running the utilities, and it'd help the state of Wyoming. But I don't think that this bill is the solution for that. You know, most of the people that you know net meter in Wyoming, generate small power in Wyoming, are just sort of independent-minded people that like to do their own thing and would like to save a little money. There's a lot of costs that go into setting up a small power generation that, of course, the utility or the state of Wyoming doesn't bear. The person that does this is the one that bears it. And mostly they just like to be left alone. I mean, we know that this bill is going to hurt them, right? I mean, that's the point. I don't see where it's going to help the utility that much. So I just think it's bad legislation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions? Ready? Okay, thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it. Any further public comment in the room? Okay, come on down, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, yeah. Good morning.
Mr. Chairman,
Most
members
of us on the committee, I think, are well aware of who you are, but please state your name for the record, and it's good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bruce Acey. I appear here this morning on behalf of Montana Dakota Utilities, MDU Resources. And in appearing, I appear in support of the bill. I do believe, as Ms. Parrish indicated, it is a compromise. I believe that there is some need to put the rates to where they should be, and I'm supportive of the idea that the commission would be able to set rates and make it consistent with other acts that have been in existence for a number of years. So just very shortly, and not to belabor it, but we stand in support of the bill. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Acey? It's good to see you, Bruce. Yeah, thank you. Any further testimony here in the room on Senate File 111? Yeah, please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's see. We're on there. Just want to say, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is John Burrows, and I'm here today representing the Wyoming Outdoor Council. For those of you who don't know us as well, we're Wyoming's oldest independent conservation group. We were established in 1967, and our mission is to protect Wyoming's environment and quality of life for now and future generations. I want to thank you all for holding the discussion over on this from Friday, just acknowledging the amount of public comment there is on the subject. And I also like to acknowledge that this has been a reoccurring theme for the committee over the last several years. This bill as a whole, from our perspective, is improved from previous versions we've seen. That said, we're still opposed to the bill for a number of reasons. So I think at the highest level, this bill strikes us really as a solution in search of a problem. Page 1, line 5 makes it clear from the beginning that we're on a subsidy hunt for net metering. And we're concerned that the bill directs a foregone conclusion that rooftop solar owners are being subsidized by other ratepayers, and we think it is premature to require the PSC to revise rates for this small group of customers when net metering represents such a tiny fraction of electricity generated in Wyoming. So in testimony on Friday, we heard that the reason for this bill is that rooftop solar owners are not paying their fair share of a utility's network cost. We'd like to point out to the committee that the utility system that we have is full of such potential cost shifts. Consider the example of rural customers who depend on miles and miles of grid network, but still pay the exact same rate as customers who live next to a substation in town. Cost shifting from an urban to a rural customer is a common and accepted practice, and it's happening all the time. Similarly, we heard Friday that utilities are recouping portions of their network cost in their per kilowatt hour rates. Does this mean a utility customer who chooses to make smart investments in energy efficiency is being subsidized by customers that use more electricity? So my point is that in a system built and designed to shift costs between different customers, singling out rooftop solar to find a de minimis subsidy is truly missing the forest for the trees here. We think that the time and resources of the Public Service Commission would be better served elsewhere, especially as Wyomingites are looking for solutions to cut electricity costs and the threat of increased utility rates looms on the horizon. So we thank you for your time, and we ask that you vote no on this bill.
Mr. Burrows, thank you very much for being here. Any questions for the Outdoor Council this morning?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Dockstader.
appreciate your written script on that. Just give me in a nutshell why you think this is singling out rooftop solar. Just shorten it up without any leading words, just
Mr. Burrows.
concerned about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Dockstader. Singling out rooftop solar because rooftop solar is the primary net metering customers. And if you look at the amount of rooftop solar and net metering generation in the state, that's predominantly coming from rooftop solar installations that private individuals are putting on their property.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Burrows, this bill grandfathers everyone in, everybody, for as long as they're around. And then going forward, I don't anticipate that the Public Service Commission would eliminate a subsidy, do you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do see the grandfathering here. We do have some questions about that, just given the timeframe, correct, the end of the year. And so we know it takes a long time to permit and to actually go ahead and build, say, a rooftop solar facility. And so there are some questions there about how realistic is that 1 year timeframe. If you're someone who's considering rooftop solar, it's a huge investment and it takes time to line up just a limited amount of contractors we have in the state, correct? So the way that we read it, there could be a rush on rooftop solar, people trying to get their facilities built, but it would be challenging for them to do that. And then there's another concern I think that we have with the grandfathering too, which is that, if you're a rooftop solar owner, you have this, let's say, installed on your ranch, your property, and you sell that property, it's not clear it looks like you would get moved into the new rooftop solar or the new rate class. And I think there'd be a way to look at that as saying that you're devaluing that property or that investment as well. So there are some concerns that we have there, although we will acknowledge that the grandfathering is really important in this case.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Anything else? Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Anyone else like to testify on this bill? Please come forward. Senate File 111, the net metering revisions. Welcome this morning.
Thank you.
Make sure you have a green light and introduce yourself for the record. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Rosemary Henry, Executive Director of the Wyoming Municipal Power Agency. And I think one of the things that I would ask the commission to consider is what additional costs would it take if a customer were to say, disconnect themselves from the grid for a certain amount. The time shifting that Chairman Case mentioned on Friday is very realistic. We will see costs, if you follow any of the wholesale markets out there, you'll see costs that are sometimes negative. In other words, customers or generators are paying utilities to take the power. It's because of the federal tax credits that those customers receive. So when I'm acting on behalf of the neighbor, when someone has excess generation, and I could either buy it at the cost or kind of store it, so to speak, for the customer generator, or I could go out and have someone pay me to take electricity at the same time, I'm really disadvantaging the neighbor. And so one of the things I would like to have you consider is what kind of batteries and additional or other kind of generator would you have to back it up if the utility were not providing the instantaneous backup for the small solar customer? That's all I have.
Ms. Hanley, thank you. Appreciate you being here. Questions on that front, committee?
Chairman.
Senator Dockstader?
Ms. Henry, and if you just state the name of who you represent again, I didn't quite hear that, but
Sure.
also, you're talking about just completely being independent, no connection whatsoever to the grid, and
Yes.
just run your own show, correct?
Yes, sir. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, take a look at those costs. And excuse me, I think I messed up the
No,
protocol
you're
here.
okay. You're fine. Keep going.
So I work for Wyoming Municipal Power Agency. We're formed by all the municipal, or by 8 of the municipals in the state of Wyoming. And so we're kind of our own thing that sits out there on the side, but
Any follow-up, Senator? You good? Senator Steinmetz, go ahead. Senator
One
Dockstader.
quick
and-
follow-up. So this agency, would they like to look for a way just to completely run independent? I'm trying to
no,
find out what your
we're
driving
in support,
question is.
we're in support of the legislation. I was just trying to show some color to what kinds of decisions a utility is making when they are out and say we're short or long of power, what the marketplace looks like that we're trying to operate in. So if we're long on power and the market is, say, negative at that point in time, we would want to back down our own generation and go out and buy during that time. When the net metering, essentially, we have to buy whatever's being generated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. That clarifies for me.
Okay.
Senator Steinmetz, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that's where I was headed to. I think you're asking us to compare what it would cost for those folks to store their additional energy that they produce in a battery array or some other storage device, as opposed to what they are not paying in order for the utility to buy the power, and that the other customers might be taking the brunt of that for, because you pass that cost on along. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Thanks, Mr. Henley. Any other thoughts? Yeah, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Further testimony on Senate File 111. Please come forward. Thank you both. Might as well get lined up and get going. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Natalie Johansson, and I represent Powder River Basin Resource Council.
Adley, I missed your last name. Can you say that again for me, please?
Johansson.
Okay, thank you.
I urge the committee to vote no on Senate File 111. This bill creates unnecessary barriers for Wyoming families, ranchers, and small businesses trying to manage their energy costs and increase their energy independence. The two-tier system will punish new customers who face uncertain compensation rates while giving utilities control over these rates, threatening Wyoming's ability to build resilience, especially in rural communities. There's no need for this bill, as stated in testimonies throughout the years. Net metered systems make up just 0.25% of all retail electric sales in Wyoming. This bill is solving no real problem. Additionally, net metered customers pay all utility fees and they're not profiting. They're investing in their own energy security. Wyoming ranks 8th in solar potential, but 36th in solar jobs. This bill will further discourage solar adoption, putting our 14 solar businesses and over 175 local jobs at risk. We should be expanding, not limiting, opportunities for our residents to achieve energy independence. This bill would make it harder for schools, local governments, agricultural operations, and families to manage their energy costs through local generation. I urge the committee to vote no on Senate File 111 and work towards policies that strengthen Wyoming's energy independence, support our local businesses, and protect our residents' right to generate their own power. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johansson. Appreciate it. Questions? Senator
Mr.
Dockstader?
Ms. Johansson, you said 175 jobs. Any idea what the payroll is in those jobs?
No, Mr. Chair, no.
Okay, anything further? Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. Mr. Winnie, good morning.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. I have a couple of experiences that I think the
Can
committee.
you make it official and introduce yourself for us?
I'm
William?
sorry, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman,
thank
Bill
you,
Winnie, Sublette County.
Thank you.
Couple of experiences that are useful for the board or for the committee. The electric companies need to build a grid assuming there's no input of this kind of power. I had an experience while stationed on active duty out on the island of Guam where the way the cloud cover worked, temperatures got down to 69 degrees. This place was 8 degrees above the equator, so you can gather, but everybody was plugging in their heaters and there was no cloud cover, there was no wind, etc. So you need to keep in mind that in terms of the infrastructure. The second is time of day makes a difference. And this kind of gets to the question of the battery, where you can store it and put it back into the grid. But Senator Dockstader may remember out in his neck of the woods, some years ago, Lower Valley Energy was able to forego building additional transmission lines by putting a little remote control box on everybody's hot water heaters so they could turn them off between 6 and 9 in the morning. And that's because that's when everybody was making breakfast and coffee or whatever. And in fact, that enabled them to forego building that additional transmission line. But the question about the battery storage and then put it back into the grid is intriguing to me, because if they could put it back into the grid 6 to 9 o'clock in the morning, that would be worth more than putting it in, say, at noon. Subject to questions, thank you.
Thank you. They didn't hear that, did they? Thank you, Mr. Winnie. I appreciate it. No more questions for Sublette County this morning. Anyone else want to come forward here in the room to testify on Senate File 111? Anybody else? Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Please line up, and I apologize. I'm busy wandering around behind the animals here. Okay. Good morning. Stephanie, good to see you. Yeah.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. It's great to see you all. Thank you for your time. My name is Steph Kessler. I live outside of Lander, and I'm here just representing myself, which is kind of fun. I'm here to oppose this bill because I believe it addresses a problem that doesn't exist. And it hurts what I call the little people, the regular Wyoming residents who want to save money on their escalating electricity bills and exercise energy freedom for their families. Net metering small rooftop solar installations mostly, and on homes mostly, is minuscule in this state. As you heard, far less than 1% of grid use. And this tiny, tiny use is nothing in comparison to what the utilities themselves have reported as the real costs driving up rates and impacting people. In the last couple of years, we've had electrical rate increases proposed in Wyoming up to 30%. That same utility asked for another 15% rate increase last year. What are the reasons stated for these utility financial needs? And I'm citing from their own media releases. extreme cold and heat events nationally, global markets, and an increase in U.S. coal exports to Europe that depleted coal stockpiles, requiring paying a higher price for natural gas, system safety upgrades, and large wind projects in their system that need new transmission. Notice that the utilities themselves are not citing these tiny, tiny home solar systems as a financial problem or harm, nor are they cited in their IRP reports required to be filed every 2 years. I urge you to consider the little people of Wyoming in your deliberations today and not side with these major monopolies. In the past 7 years, I've testified on similar bills in the legislature, and I've only seen utilities themselves and regulators speak in favor of these bills. Have you ever received an irate email from your constituents complaining about their neighbors' solar panels? Probably not, but I'm sure you've heard about the utilities steadily increasing electricity rates. And I believe this will only continue as we see huge demand coming in from data centers and AI use. So please let Wyoming people have this small tool to help them reduce their home electricity bills and keep their homes affordable. Please set aside this bill, and thanks for your time. Glad to answer questions.
Ms. Kessler, good to see you. Thanks. Appreciate it. Didn't mean to skip over the top of you there a few minutes ago.
I snuck in.
Yeah, there you go. Anything for Ms. Kessler? Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning. Please introduce yourself. For the record, make sure you got a green light and get close to that microphone for us, if you would, please.
Okay, I think we got a green light now.
Okay.
My name is Travis Spears. I am the owner of the Electric and Solar Specialist here in Cheyenne. We employ 15 employees. We are a full licensed electrical contractor as well as a solar contractor right here in the state of Wyoming. I want to voice my opinion and definitely oppose this bill. I think one of the biggest things that was brought up at the beginning when Senator Case had brought this bill forward is that, this is a gotcha to the utility contractors. That is simply not the case. Our solar systems work in parallel to the grid. When our systems are making power, which is typically during the daytime when the sun is out, most of our homeowners are not at home. They're in these commercial buildings. These commercial buildings, their charge out rate for electricity is significantly higher than a residential rate is. So when we're talking about compensation of 1-to-1, we're getting compensated at, say, 12.8 cents a kilowatt, where that power that we're using or producing is being used at a commercial rate at, say, 15 cents a kilowatt. So utility contractors are making money off of these solar systems that are installed. These are small power productions that help our grid. We're reducing the requirements or the demand on our local power plants by helping supply power to those that are using it. Some of the things that I'm also seeing in the bill is that there is a definition or a word change of small customer generator, but nowhere in this bill does it state at what size. Are we planning on staying at 25 kilowatts? Are we planning on this now being the discretion of the utility contractors or the PSC? If we're changing this to a 25 kilowatt, is this based off of the AC side that we can connect to the grid through the meter, the actual net meter that's on the side of the house? Or is this based off the DC side that we have no control over? DC can't be connected to the utility grid through the utility contractor's meter. So in the event of connecting DC to AC, we have one thing that happens, and it's a pretty big explosion. I definitely want to urge you guys to vote no against this Senate File 111. This isn't going to help the industry in producing power right here in Cheyenne or right here in the state of Wyoming. Like wind farms that are producing power here, are we keeping the power here, or is it getting transmission lines down to or out of state? The other thing that's inside this bill is that we are allowing the utility contractors to dictate when we do the annual true-up. Why are we not making it continuity across the board for our state residents? Why are we making this something that's set up for our out-of-state corporate-owned monopolies or utility contractors that can only serve one area. I think we need to have some continuity here, and I think we need to have the understanding that we are not here as a got you. We are here to work in parallel with utility contractors. Thank you.
Mr. Peters, you commented on the true-up language. Whereabouts are you seeing that in the bill? Can you remind me where that is and help me understand what you just referenced and what your concern is?
So on, looks like line number 2, it's on page 8, where it says annually at a date set by the electrical utility. Any remaining unused kilowatt hour credit accumulated during the previous year shall be sold to the electrical utility at the electrical utility's filed avoided cost rate.
So what would be your preference on that language?
So right now, it's just set up as annually, and I believe that, for example, Black Hills has set theirs to where they reset because their billing carries from December like 15th to January 14th, so it resets January 14th at the first of that calendar year. Now, in all reality, I'm not looking at making two different true-up times. If you look at customer generation, like wind turbines, right? So we have a lot more wind that happens through the winter months than we do during the summer months, or we have a lot more solar during the summer months than we do in the winter months because of the available sun hours. So solar, I guess, best bet would be to reset it around, say, April 1st or May 1st, where wind is going to be better off being reset probably around January 1st. But I think if we make it straight across the board for all utility contractors to follow, then we're not worrying about what they do in Oregon. We're not worrying about what they do in Utah. We're not worrying about what they do in South Dakota. This is a bill for Wyoming, so I'd like to see the continuity stay for Wyoming.
Okay, I follow you, Mr. Peters. Thank you for that. I think it does go right here to home as well. It just says the electric utility. I assume that would be, the utility in a given area, but we'll consider that as we go. Any questions for Mr. Peters? Senator Dockstader.
Mr. Chairman, not directly related to the bill, but Mr. Spears, you have 15 people employed. Has that number stayed pretty well even to your particular niche industry? Or has it increased?
Mr. Peters, go ahead.
Sorry, Senator Dockstader. We opened up in 2018 with 3 employees. At our peak, we were at 17, and we are currently at 15. We stay relatively stable throughout the year, but it's because we're a full licensed electrical contractor. In the last year, solar market has actually gone down. And it's gone down because of the interest rates that have skyrocketed, so financing projects are a lot more costly when it goes to installing a system. Those that are installing these systems are paying $25,000, $35,000 of their own money to install the system on their own house, to produce the power, to essentially lock in their current rate of their utility power, knowing that the increased rates for the same power that they use would not affect them because they're still be able to produce that same amount of power. To overbuild a system to make money or gotcha on the utility is not financially smart. It doesn't make sense. If we want to overbuild a system to say 200 and some odd %, our return on investment on a project like that could be 25, 35, 45 years now versus having a 10 or 12-year, 15-year return on investment, all depending on how the financial rates work out. It doesn't make sense to make additional power just for the utility to take that at the final avoided cost rate and then sell it at 12 to 15 cents a kilowatt hour.
Okay, anything else, committee? Mr. Peters, thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman.
We know you. Welcome. Please, for the record, though.
My name is Carl Allred, and I'm from Evanston.
Mr. Allred, good to see you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak in opposition to this bill. When you change the way that you compensate this electricity, it has some far-reaching effects. Currently, right now, they have to pay to buy that electricity at avoided cost. Now, that's much different. I'll give you an example. We had been selling solar systems out in Illinois, which is one of the best markets in the country because their electricity cost is so high. They've shut down all their coal-fired, and they're actually buying all their electricity in Illinois from other states mostly. There's some solar farms and things that they have out there, but the majority of it they buy from other states because they made them shut all their coal-fired plants down. So it was very profitable until last year. As of the end of last year, 2024, they changed all the rules. They did have net metering, and now they were at 1-to-1 net metering, and they flipped over to avoided cost, which kind of destroyed that market. And now any system that's put in has to be put in with batteries, which substantially raises that cost. So basically doing small systems doesn't even pay for itself anymore. We used to be able to go in there and tell people that, well, 96% of what we sold were power purchase agreements. They weren't purchases by the customer. What they would do is they signed an agreement, we would put the system on, we still own the system, and they would buy the electricity from the solar system versus from the utility. And it worked with 1-to-1 metering, net metering. And when they've changed it now, we cannot sell some of the smaller systems. It will never pay for itself. So they have to be bigger systems. You got to add batteries to them. It greatly increases the cost. So what we have here in Wyoming, solar will never be like it is in some of the other states because we're probably one of the cheapest states in the country for buying electricity. And then when you go to avoided cost, it doesn't really make sense to build a system bigger than what you're going to use. And the net metering helps because, like say, you make electricity during the day, you don't make it at night on a solar system. And so basically you're putting it in, then you're taking it back out. I do agree with the previous speaker here that talked about changing the date. In the current statute, it says that they have to true up at the end of the calendar year. I won't tell you my contract says different, but for solar, it does make sense for April or May, just because you produce a lot during the summer and you're banking that and use it during the winter. So April, May, I do like that part. But as far as the rest of it, I would hesitate to change it. Now we're going to go from what is avoided cost in current statute to letting them come up with whatever they want to come up with as far as Public Service Commission. And I'll tell you, I have solar on my house, but I bought it like in 15 or 16, and it's only about half of what I need. And my electric bill in just the last couple of years, 2 years or so, went from about $150 a month to $218 a month. That's quite a bit of change there. So anyway, I would just urge you to oppose this bill.
Okay, Mr. Allred, thanks. It's always good to see you, and thanks for being all the way over here, to join us for a little while. Anything for Mr. Allred? Senator
You've
Dockstader.
got almost 10 years now with solar on your house. Have you then noticed, somewhat related, have you noticed a steady increase in cost then, despite having that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Dockstader, yes, the electricity cost for what, like I say, I don't produce enough for my house. And so, like I said, in just the last couple of years, I've gone from $150 a month, I'm on an equal pay, to up now it's $218 a month. And that's just because Public Service Commission didn't give the utility the rate increases they asked for. It would be substantially higher. And, for individual people, it's a big investment to put solar on their house. I mean, mine cost me about $35,000 back then. And so it really takes a lot to recoup that. But for those that want to try to save some, especially with the increasing electric costs coming in, and I guarantee they're going up again next year. But I think that we should, let people do what they can to save some money.
Thank you, Mr. Allred. Appreciate it. Okay, anyone else in the room want to testify on Senate File 111? Let's, Mr. Petrie, I was kind of saving you. We've got a bunch online that may throw some things out that we'll want to have you weigh in on, if that's okay. Please come forward. Yeah, I want to get everybody in the room, and then we'll go to those streaming in who want to join us this morning. Good morning, Mr. Bush. Good to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you all this morning. For the record, David Bush here with Black Hills Energy. So a couple of things that I'd like to point out on this issue. As you all know, I think a few of you have been on this committee for a while and have covered this issue a lot. This is one that gets a lot of emotion to it, and a couple of questions that have come up that I'll try to touch on. So you don't see a lot of people here, basic residents showing up saying, hey, I don't like my neighbor's solar panels, because they don't understand it and they don't know about it. This is such a complex issue, I think, as we've heard testimony over the years, and even since Friday going into today. There's so much that goes into this, and how the rates are structured and how this system works. The average person, in my opinion, doesn't understand it. My father-in-law has a system on his home, net metering solar system. He put it on 5 or 6 years ago when he moved into the neighborhood. That was a personal decision he made based on his belief that he was saving the planet for his grandchildren. That's what he told me. And I tried to explain the whole cost shift problem to him, and he was a civil engineer and understood things. And he kind of said, that doesn't make sense to me. I just know that I'm saving the planet for my grandkids. Okay.
We do love our grandkids.
Yeah, yes,
we do.
And now we're in a position of unfortunately having to sell his home. And the realtor that we've talked to has said it's actually looks like it might be a benefit at this point, having those panels on his roof as a selling item. People are looking for it. Certain people are. So there's some benefits there, and the personal experience. Just wanted to share that anecdote. But I think the broader problem that we have with the issue of net metering is not that it hurts the utility. We don't take it in the shorts at all. We're not punished. This isn't about money. As I testified last week on a different issue, Cheyenne is growing financially. The company's doing just fine. It is a small number of folks that are on net metering, but it is something that I think other states have looked at and decided is that's something they need to address. If there is no cost shift, and I prefer to call it a cost shift rather than a subsidy, because it's been stated in prior testimony, subsidies show up, right? You get something. There's a line on your bill or something that says you're receiving a subsidy. What this is a cost shift. So to explain it as simple as I think I can, you have a basic rate that every utility charges. In that rate, for the most part, it varies by utility, but for the most part, for us in particular, we're about 2/3 is our fixed costs, which power lines, power poles, all the infrastructure, all the stuff it takes to run a utility. 1/3 of the cost of that rate is the fuel. For us, that's coal and natural gas, primarily. So the rates there are 2/3 of that goes towards paying the infrastructure. With net metering systems, the way that the billing works, as you produce power from your net metering system, which net metering is a rate mechanism. So it's referring to how we do the rates, not actually the system. I should be careful about that. Net metering rates, if you produce power, you're getting our retail rate. You're credited our retail rate for the power that you produced. At the end of the year, the true up that's been discussed, that's when the avoided cost comes in. You get paid for the avoided cost rate of any power that's left in your bank, for lack of a better term. So that's how it all works. So when you're being credited the retail rate, we're taking out that 2/3 that should be paid for the system that you're still using. You're still connected to the grid. If you're not on battery backup and truly independent and out, you cut off from the grid, you've just got batteries in your basement, you produce your power, you store it on batteries. When your batteries run out, you fire up a generator or you just sit in the dark, right? Totally off the grid. That's totally separate. If you are on the grid, you are still using the infrastructure that the rest of the people are paying for. That's where the problem comes in and the unfairness that this bill is trying to address. The true update, and Mr. Petrie, it sounds like is going to come up after me, and he can touch on some of these issues as well. True updates, things like that are a perfect place for the Public Service Commission to do that during their rulemaking on this bill. If it passes, they would hold those hearings. People could come testify like they do here, weigh in on this, and make sure that their voice is heard. The commission takes all that into effect and can probably do a lot more and make a lot more, have a lot more flexibility than what the current statute gives them, because it's so rigid, as you all know, in statute. If there is no cost shift, if there is no subsidy or whatever you want to call it, then nothing really changes. People are still going to make their decisions on whether or not they want a rooftop solar system or a wind turbine or whatever, based on their belief that it's going to help them save money, or maybe they want to go off the grid, or they want to save the planet, or whatever their thoughts are. Unlike many other states, Wyoming doesn't have any sort of clean power mandate where folks are almost forced to do these systems to meet those mandates that some states have set. I think it's, and I might get them confused, I apologize, but California, Nevada, some of those states have set those mandates, which has basically forced people into these decisions. So we see this as a positive step in the right direction. It's not the perfect bill. I think Ms. Parrish also said that. It's not the perfect bill, but we do believe that this is a problem, potentially could be a problem, much faster. We're growing significantly here in Cheyenne with our residential hookups. So I don't have numbers, unfortunately. The person that we work with on those hasn't been able to get those to me yet, but I've testified in the past that we've been growing significantly over the past few years. Sometimes a couple hundred hookups a year, which again doesn't sound like a lot, but a few hundred here, a few hundred there, and you're looking at real numbers. And I think about, and maybe this isn't an appropriate comparison, but it struck me 30 years ago, Yellowstone reintroduced wolves. It's 14 of them. It's not a big deal. It's a big deal now. Let's take care of the problem before it becomes a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Appreciate it. It's always good to have you here. Any questions for Black Hills? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate that. All right, we're going to keep going. And Mr. Petrie, I promise we want to get you up here too. We've got folks online. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
My name is Nathan Nicholas from the Cook Law Firm on behalf of Rocky Mountain Power. And I understand there's a lot of people still wishing to speak, so I'll be brief. The issues and concerns have been expressed very accurately by the other utilities and by the regulators. Rocky Mountain has and will continue to see those same issues. Rocky Mountain Power does not object to small customer generation, including rooftop solar. In fact, they've supported it in the past, and they will continue to support it. That said, we need to ensure that all customers are paying for the services that they use and require in order to be hooked up to the grid. As Mr. Bush just stated, we're a small percentage now, but that percentage is going to continue to grow. And as we've seen in places like California and Utah, it will become a problem, and we think that this bill is a good opportunity to get ahead of the problem, looking into the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it, Mr. Nicholas. Thanks. Good to have you here this morning. Anybody for Rocky Mountain Power? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. Anybody else in the room? Anyone else? Let's go to those waiting to stream in. And Lily, how many do we have?
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 people online ready to speak. The first one is Charles Moore.
Okay. So I see a Miss Catherman is on the screen. No, at the bottom. And Mr. Moore, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think it's Mr. Thomas, Charles Thomas.
Okay, I apologize. I'm a little confused on who's up there. Mr. Thomas, good morning. Welcome. Please introduce yourself officially for the record for us.
Yeah, good morning, Senator Landon and all the rest of the senators. My name's Charles Thomas, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Jackson Hole Climate Action Collective. We oppose this bill because it will discourage the installation of solar panels. Senator Case has a good point that folks who generate their own energy don't pay as much to support the grid as their neighbors do. But we feel it's important to look at the other side of the equation, and that's the economic advantages that solar panel users provide their neighbors. So generating electricity in the United States on average emits an amount of CO2 that costs money. And that number is roughly about $1,300 per year. Now, that's a tough number to pin down because as the levels of CO2 increase, that number increases. But that's a good average right now for guesstimating the cost of the CO2. So solar panel users are saving their neighbors approximately $1,300 a year by generating their own electricity. There's no doubt that the warming temperatures created by an increase in CO2 is growing more expensive every year. At our current pace, dealing with climate change will cost us about half of our GDP toward the end of the century. Incidentally, it would cost us about 1% of our GDP to mitigate climate change right now, but if left unchecked, it will eventually reach about 50% of our GDP. So this bill is basically, it's based on facts, but I think it's important to address all the facts. And the fact is that CO2 emissions cost us a lot. I feel like if I had been on the Titanic, I would have been the guy bailing at the very end, right to the bitter end. And we feel that this bill sort of pumps water back into the boat. And so that's why we oppose it. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Appreciate you taking time, Mr. Thomas. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Is Ms. Catherine next then?
Hello. Can you hear me? Yes?
We can. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you, Senator Landon, and all of you on this committee. I live in rural Converse County, and we put in solar panels.
Introduce yourself for us, please. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we want to make sure we have you correctly in the record.
Oh, yes. My name is Maria Catherman. I live in rural Converse County, and I have had solar panels since 2017. I'm not using my video because I am in rural Wyoming where internet connections are spotty and not very fast. So if I put on my video, the sound gets garbled. So I hope you can excuse me, but I am here.
That is quite all.
Thank you. One of the things about living in rural Wyoming in the last 2 decades, we have noticed the incredible expense that the Rocky Mountain Power incurs to service our electric far and wide across the county. We had all the power lines renewed. The project took 2 years, and I can't imagine the millions of dollars it took. And so, as was stated earlier, these are costs that we in rural Wyoming don't fully shoulder. That is, that they go to the other Rocky Mountain customers far more proportionally than they do to we in the rural areas because there's so few of us up. So cost sharing and dividing costs are that isn't new to just solar, I can tell you. When we decided to put in solar, we had a analysis done as to exactly how many we would need based on our previous 3 years of electricity use. And this consultant stated quite clearly, the closer you can get to absolutely matching what you use, the better it is for you. It will never pay to produce more money, to produce more solar than you can use, that money is not recompensed at the same rate. So we made a real effort to make sure we didn't overproduce. And I think most solar customers go through that same process, evaluating how many panels they should have, because that's something we want to avoid, because it doesn't make any economical sense, as has been pointed out 2 or 3 times. And over Wyoming, if we only have 0.25% of people that have solar generation going on, and you consider the very small amount most of those home solar systems produce in excess, this is a fraction of what we're talking about compared to the regular expenses of maintaining the grid. And so places like Nevada, Utah, California are just not analogous to Wyoming. Their penetration of solar use is up to 35%. So as Wyoming increases solar use, how many years do you think it's going to take to get up to 20% where this will make a difference? So many years. And we've had it hovering right about this same amount for the population is increasing, of course, but this is not a problem. And for some reason, this bill comes up again and again. It's decided, oh, this is not a problem. Why are we setting up more regulations? Why are we complicating the billing? So it just makes no sense. This is, I think, the 3rd session in a row I've testified against these bills because there's not a problem. Well, I encourage you to vote no on this. Let's wait till we have a reasonable penetration of solar panels in the state where this might be a problem. And if it is, then let's address it. It's no use setting up regulations, complicating the billing system for the power generators as well as for the utilities. There's just no sense in this. So I encourage you to vote no.
Thank you, Ms. Catherman. I appreciate you taking the time this morning. Let's keep moving. We've got one more to go, I think, here streaming in. Lily, are they still on board? Okay, we're going to keep going. I would ask you not to repeat too much of everything that we've heard all morning, but by all means, let's try to get everybody in. We're going to run short of time here pretty soon. So welcome. Good morning.
Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Good morning. My name is Shannon Anderson. and I'm speaking to you this morning from Sheridan. It's good to see you all this session. My day job is now with an organization called Solar United Neighbors. We're a national nonprofit that helps people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. We support net energy metering because it is a critical way to provide solar-owning families and small businesses a return on their investment, and to provide fair compensation for the value of the energy and grid services rooftop solar systems provide. But this morning, I'm really here in my personal capacity as one of the lawyers who was involved in the recent Wyoming Supreme Court litigation involving our state's net metering statute. This was the first time the statute had been litigated, and the decision from our high court provided essential clarity around the terms and conditions of the statutory scheme that has been in place since 2001. To be blunt, Mr. Chairman, that decision instructs that this bill is not necessary. The court held that utilities can go already to the Public Service Commission and adjust the value of export credit compensation for rooftop solar owners. They just have to do the work of conducting a meaningful cost of service and value of solar study with all of the right inputs and assumptions, something the utility involved in that litigation did not do. So again, if a utility believes the compensation they are providing to solar owners is too much, they can go forward and present a new proposal to the Public Service Commission. They just have to show that the new proposal is just and reasonable, just like every other rate tariff they have on their books. The Supreme Court's decision is fresh and new. It's just from September. And I would encourage you to give utilities time to think through their response to it before upending the system through a massive statutory change. And then from a more personal perspective, I would highlight that as a current solar owner, I have strong concerns about the bill. While the current system, my current system would be grandfathered in, if I would expand or upgrade my system, that expansion would not be grandfathered. And I'd effectively have two sets of rates for my home, creating billing complications and a host of other issues. Additionally, if I sell my home, the new owner would be subject to the new set of rules, whatever they may be, devaluing my property and ultimately the sale price of my home. Mr. Bush testified to there is actually an added value to your home when you install panels. And, again, it's a property right that you then have as a solar owner when you sell your home to be able to do that. This uncertainty and devaluing would also apply to homes and businesses across the state. And as a side note, this devaluing would also impact property tax assessments for solar homes and businesses. And as noted in previous testimony, the annual true-up date, the date that any excess solar generated and provided to the utility is sold to the utility at the avoided cost rate, is not grandfathered for existing solar owners under the proposed bill before you. And if that date changes, it could negatively impact the compensation for existing solar owners, in addition to new customer generators. So there's a grandfathering problem with that annual true-up date. Finally, as a practitioner in the Utility Commission space, I would caution you around the timeline in the bill. As you know, our Public Service Commission is a very busy body, and asking them to conduct rulemaking and then the study necessary to establish an appropriate compensation system for each of our 4 regulated electric utilities by the end of the year is a very tall order. The fiscal note of the bill says there's no personnel or fiscal impact, yet this bill certainly has an impact for the PSC. I think it's important in this bill, similar versions of it in the past have sort of inferred that you can set a rate for new net metering one time for all the 4 utilities. You can't do that if it's going to be just and reasonable. Every utility system is so different. MDU is so different than Rocky Mountain Power, is incredibly different from Black Hills and Cheyenne Light. And so rulemaking is not a good vehicle to actually set a just and reasonable rate for new solar owners. And so you're going to have to, you can do rulemaking to maybe set the process up, but then to actually get the tariffs you're going to have to do that through the regular tariff rate making structure. And again, all of that has to happen by the end of the year, which is just, it's going to be pretty impossible, honestly. So I would urge you to vote no on Senate File 111. And thank you for your time and consideration. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any questions? Okay, let's keep moving. You said we have 4 or 5 more people to go? Okay. Scott, good morning. Take it away. I'd ask that you try to be as quick and to the point as you can be.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. This has been a robust discussion already. My name is Scott Kane. I'm calling in from Lander, Wyoming. I own and operate a solar contracting business here, and I believe that I'm speaking on behalf of my 18 employees and our hundreds of past and hopefully future solar customers around the state. I want to address two points. One is the uncertainty that this bill would bring to solar in Wyoming, and the second is the treatment of the rural electric co-ops under this bill. As for the uncertainty, Wyoming's existing statutory net metering system is simple, it's easy to understand, and according to the 2022 Wyoming cross-border study that has been referenced before, it's a fair system. As a solar business owner, I'm concerned that the elegance of the statewide statutory rule might be replaced by a patchwork of rates and rules, much like Ms. Anderson just warned about. That would be specific to each utility and each electrical cooperative, adding uncertainty and complexity where it is just not needed. As it relates to the co-ops in the state, this is actually my primary concern with the bill. This bill, as is currently written, exempts the rural electric co-ops from PSC rate regulation as it relates to net metering. You can see in the bill, section 105C addresses this. Instead, directing the board of directors of each of the cooperatives to adopt rates, terms, and conditions to compensate new small customer generators. This bill makes no requirements that these rates, terms, and conditions be just and reasonable. The individual co-ops may adopt widely varying rates and terms, and it's possible that these rates and terms might be disadvantageous to customer generation. Some utilities and electrical cooperatives may perceive customer generation as akin to competition. After all, customer generation does provide a way for a home or a business to reduce their overall electric energy purchases. Some electrical co-ops, if released from the existing Wyoming net metering statute, and if unsupervised by the Public Service Commission, may seek to actively discourage their members from engaging in customer generation. This bill explicitly allows them to do so. In such case, a customer generator would have no recourse other than to file a complaint with the Public Service Commission. I hope you'll decline to move this bill forward and instead leave the current statewide simple net metering rule in place. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you very much for the attention you're giving this topic today.
Mr. Kane, thank you. Anything for our Lander businessman? Okay, thank you very much. Let's keep going. Lily?
Mr. Chairman, I believe those are the only people who want to testify now online.
Okay, I think that covers it. Let's go to Mr. Petrie. Good morning.
Good morning.
We appreciate you being here again and look forward to your thoughts about the testimony this morning.
My pleasure, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Petrie. I'm Deputy Chairman at the Wyoming Public Service Commission. I've got a a few things that I'll zip through as efficiently as I can, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have
Okay.
after the testimony that you've heard.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. We appreciate it.
First, I want to sort of set the baseline for the Public Service Commission's role. We don't encourage or discourage net metering. Our job is establishing just and reasonable rates across the board for all the utilities that we set rates for, which, and I'll get to it in a minute. Some of the co-ops we don't set rates for, most of them. Only Precor we set the retail rates for. But when I say just and reasonable rates, what that means is that the customer who causes a cost pays that cost to the extent that that's practically possible without excessive complexity. And you heard an example about customers who live a different distance from facilities, and certainly we're all aware of that. And there are some practical limitations on what you can do. You can't have a separate perfect rate for every customer based on their exact characteristics and their exact situation. So you take groups of like customers and you set those rates so that the customers in that group, as close as you can, pay the cost that they cause on the system. That's what we mean by just and reasonable rates. And we're not in the business of encouraging or discouraging this sort of customer activity. Another thing is that it's not the Commission's purpose, and there are no laws in Title 37 or otherwise that I know of, or the rules of the Commission, that are intended to, or that actually do, obstruct people in Wyoming, or businesses or industries or anybody, from exercising control over their energy costs if they're motivated to do so and to take those kind of actions and investments to reduce their utility provided consumption, or if they want to go off the grid and be completely independent, there's nothing that stops anybody from doing that other than practical concerns and cost. It might not be a better deal to go off the grid, but you certainly can do it. There's no prohibition whatsoever that I know of. Another point is that there's been some discussion about the grandfathering aspect of this bill. So everybody who's net metering now, as I understand this, would continue under the existing statute. Now, as I explained last week, there is some indication that there are likely some subsidies. Now, we haven't held public proceedings and established the extent of those or determined which utilities have a problem and which don't, but that is something that the Commission is capable of doing. Grandfathering those who have already got a net metering system, and I'm tempted to say a solar system, but if I do, I mean a net metering system. It could be several other things, but mostly they're solar, rooftop solar. Some of those people have spent a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars, buying those systems, which they expect to run for decades. And the grandfathering aspect of it, to me, looks like it's meant to protect those people that have already made that investment in some reliance on the current statutory system. And so that should very much reduce or eliminate complaints about the unfairness of changing things after somebody has already invested. I can understand why somebody wouldn't like to see a change if they had just done that or recently done it. But at the same time, there shouldn't be, I can't see any reason to expect it to be necessary to maintain an arrangement in the statutes that might be producing this subsidy phenomenon for the state to see continued growth in these type of installations. I really doubt that anybody who does this is doing it because they see an opportunity to get a relatively minor, in an individual case, subsidy from other customers of the utility. That I think is it seems unlikely that that's the basis of anybody's decision. I doubt that very many people understand that that's going on. I think you've heard some testimony that people generally don't realize how this rate system actually works. The magnitude of the subsidy, and we've got some kind of stale information here. I have no reason to expect that it's fundamentally changed, but several years ago, I think it was 2000 or 2001, the estimate that was provided to you through the Office of Consumer Advocate showed that the three larger IOUs in the state, the investor-owned utilities, and this wasn't, a super precise product of an elaborate public hearing process, but the estimate was that subsidy amounted to about $500,000 at the then current net metering penetration rates. Now, that also included a projection to increase that level of penetration, like you might see in New Mexico or perhaps California, up to a 10% penetration level. And then that would give you about a $12.5 million subsidy transfer. Now, this really isn't, even though you've heard a lot about avoided cost, and there was the Supreme Court case recently about avoided cost, what we've really been talking about in the discussion of a potential subsidy problem is not the avoided cost. That has to do with the generation that is in excess of a net meter's usage. So that's the part you're selling back to the utility. Now, I think it's generally understood everywhere that you're not really doing this to get in the business of generating and selling power back to the utility. You're doing it to offset your own utility rates or your own utility consumption. That offset avoids the actual retail rate that you would have otherwise paid. When you are generating more than you consume, that gets you down to avoided cost, which is generally a fraction of what the retail rate is. The retail rate includes a lot more, and it's generally a lot higher rate. Well, it's always a higher rate. And so the avoided cost issue is a different issue. That is part of the system that you have to establish in order to have a just and reasonable rate structure. But that is not the aspect of net metering that involves a subsidy. What we're talking about here is the monthly charge, which is mainly intended to recover the fixed costs of the utility. But most of the utilities' rate structures don't get particularly close to recovering all their fixed costs. So in each charge for each kilowatt hour as you go along through the billing period, there is a portion of that. And if it's 15 cents, there's a portion of that 15 cents that is collected for the utility's fixed costs. So if all the customers use an average amount, then that portion adds up to enough to cover those fixed costs. And when you avoid consuming the utility's energy, you do not get billed those volumetric charges. So if you're a typical customer and you use 750 kilowatt hours and there's 2 cents worth of fixed costs in every volumetric unit in every kilowatt hour, then that's 2 cents times 750 kilowatt hours. So that's where the subsidy issue resides. It really isn't particularly tied to the avoided cost question at all, or whether avoided cost is the proper compensation. And it is at the end of the year. We know now from the court decision that in the case where a utility does a monthly true up on overproduction, that the commission erred in its decision. And the error, as I understand the court's decision, was that we applied a presumption that avoided cost was an appropriate compensation for the utility to pay, in that case, a net metering customer for that power that was unsolicited, but the utility must take it. So it's not something the utility arranged for or requested or said it needed. And so we made a presumption that avoided cost, which is appropriate in other situations for that general type of power, was a good measure. And the court told us that was not the right way to do it. And that we didn't base the decision on the evidence in the case or explain ourselves sufficiently. So there was some discussion about that previously that I think focused on a concurring opinion in that case, but the majority opinion told us you were not entitled to make that presumption. That was an error and you shouldn't have done it that way. On the matter of the commission's ability to do this and establish a system, it very well may involve proceedings centered on each of the regulated electric utilities because they are different. They have a different degree of subsidization, if any. And we haven't, like I said, we haven't had a proceeding to determine that there is. It looked like it several years ago, and I don't think, I can't think of anything that's changed, so we would be looking at that, but no determination has been made, and we wouldn't go into, and we never do, go into any proceedings with a predetermination, or wouldn't be looking for a result. We would look at it, like we always do, in a public contested case proceeding or rulemaking proceeding in advance of contested case proceedings. And then we would see what the evidence that was brought to the commission by the utilities and other interested parties, which I'm sure we'll have some, if this ends up being a task we're assigned, and then some decision will be made about what a fair structure of rates for net metering customers would look like.
That makes a lot of sense. And Mr. Petrie, as you wrap up, I want to get to the sponsor to take us home, but let me see if there's any questions for you this morning, okay? If that, Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, just really quick, Mr. Petrie, you'd have to take this through the whole process then to determine these rates? What kind of time frame is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. What about the end of the year? That was brought up this morning. Do you feel like that's too much of a lift or just about right?
Mr. Chairman, that somewhat depends on what we mean when we say to establish a system of compensation. I'm not sure that we would be finished with individual utility proceedings by that time. I think with maybe a shade of optimism that we would be able to finish any rulemaking proceeding that we have to conduct to do this, and then to instruct the utilities what is expected of them to bring to the commission and when. But normally rate proceedings are allowed a 10-month timeframe to complete. So from filing to completion, everything that affects a rate at the commission is required to be finished within 10 months. So it may be that I perhaps misunderstand the intention of this. I don't know that it's likely that we would actually have the new system completely in place by the end of 2025, but I think we would be able to establish the framework and to commence the process.
Anything else, senators? Okay, Mr. Petrie, I'm going to let you sit back and we may still fire a question at you, but thank you. Appreciate you being here this morning.
Mr. Chairman, we had one other person who finally was able to get, I'm sorry, it's Jim Roscoe, and he said he was going to speak very quickly.
Okay, we're running short on time this morning, but I'll sure let him come on board for a quick comment, okay? Are you there this morning? Good morning.
Well, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. It's nice to see you again. I would just like to say that I think Mr. Peters and the last Mr. Petrie should be reviewed as to what they said again, and I'm opposing this bill. I think there really isn't a problem now, and I think that the problem could be solved with metering in the future when it becomes, if it ever becomes an issue. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Can you do me a big favor and just give us your name again for the record?
Sorry, Chairman Langen, this is Jim Roscoe. I used to serve with you and in the legislature.
I thought that was you, Representative, and thank you for weighing in. And sorry that we fumbled a little bit to get you on board, but it's always good to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the fumbling was on my part.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Representative. Keep doing well.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna have the sponsor of the bill come forward. That's we're gonna end testimony at that point. And Senator Cage, do you want to take us home on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you with all my heart for listening to this. This has been quite a journey, and as you can see, it's very emotional. There are strong opinions, but all this illustrates why we need to do something about this. And I hope you're not persuaded by arguments that the cost shifting is de minimis. And I hope you're not persuaded by arguments that we're hurting the utility, because any cost shift that occurs to other customers, your neighbors, our neighbors. They're paying for, in essence, every kilowatt hour that you exchange at the retail rate and don't contribute to the fixed costs of the system. And, you know, it's a linear, it's identity. In fact, it's just the math. It will grow as more and more people take advantage of that exchange at retail. That is the reason we need to do something about the bill now. Mr. Chairman, there were lots of testimony. Some I think is confused. I think Mr. Petrie did the good job about the idea that the month-to-month exchange is at the retail rate. And I don't know if you've looked at your bill, but you can see what the retail kilowatt hour energy cost is. I just looked this weekend, and I believe it's like 10.8 cents. I'm not exact, but so that's not the avoided cost rate. The avoided cost rate is what happens if you after an entire year, you have excess you can sell back to the utility. That's where the avoided cost rate comes in. It's not the month-to-month, and it's the month-to-month that causes you to be a shortfall on your contribution to the utility's capital needs. Now, it's been said, well, this is like weatherization. If I put insulation in the roof of my home, then this is the same thing. It shaves my use of the system. The trouble is the insulation in your roof of your home works every day. It works on cloudy days, works on sunny days. The problem is that your solar system or wind system doesn't produce all the time. It's an intermittent resource. It's much more inferior in the winter, on the shorter days and more clouds, much more superior in the summer. In the summer, though, and this is a really huge point, is that solar energy is very, very plentiful. And in fact, I caused to be passed out to the committee, and I have extra copies for everyone. It's the gold standard cost analysis. It's called the Lazard study. And I have extra for the people in the audience or anybody online. Be happy to send it to them. but it shows the most expensive resource for energy, levelized cost of energy, which includes capital expenses, is rooftop solar. It's the highest one by far. Now, there are ranges, so there are overlaps. But the lowest cost, one of the lowest costs, is utility solar. Much, much cheaper. So I know I've been painted as not being considerate of the environment. And we all have different opinions about the contribution of CO2 and its impacts on climate change. And I believe it's real. And I believe we should be doing something about it, Mr. Chairman. That's Kale case. But if we really wanted to do it, we could take the money that we're using to subsidize rooftop solar and put it into utility scale solar and achieve it at a third the cost. When we entered World War II and we needed to build B-29 bombers, we didn't farm it out so that everybody could build a piece of the bomber for a social engineering kind of thing. We built them in big factories and we got it done. If it's that big of a problem, sir, that's what we need to do. But I'll also point out to you that it's more expensive than the makeup power. For example, gas combined cycle power is one of the cheaper, reliable, dispatchable power sources. And what we have is a situation where in the winter, we have to fire up gas turbines to pay you back for energy that your solar system's not making right now, and that you put in the bank in the summer so that you have a call on that. That's what's fundamentally unfair as we go forward, Mr. Chairman. That's where there were several comments from people that talk about energy independence and people wanting to save on their electric bill and they want to be energy independent. I respect that. But you're not energy independent because you still pull from the grid when you're not producing. You reduce your costs because you stick it to your customers, your neighbors, the people next door, not to the utility. Mr. Chairman, this is a wall that we've been at for all these years. We need a door through that wall because it's going to have benefits for the climate. It's going to have benefits for renewable energy if we would be more open about our thinking. Right now, the size of these systems is capped at a small amount, 25 kilowatt, because of the distortion. There are bills that have come to the legislature, and there's some here, there's one here, to expand that cap. We never should expand the cap if it's a subsidized rate. But if it's a compensatory rate, if it's a fair rate, what you contribute is fairly compensated, we don't need a cap. We could allow for all sorts of different power things. We've got big things happening. We've got large companies that want to build either third-party generation or their own generation and feed it into the grid. We've got little tiny producers that want to do the same, but they're restricted by the size of the cap and by the compensation mechanism. The compensation mechanism with the subsidies is where the problem is. If it were appropriate, we could begin to go to a new era where communities, neighbors could get together and establish solar facilities. If it didn't hurt other customers, it'd be a great idea. We would need caps. People could build bigger systems if they choose and if it was economic to do so. They could figure out something else. They could install batteries and be appropriately compensated for the batteries they install because the batteries help their load shifting. But there is no battery on Earth that will take July produced power and make it available for the entire month of December and January. We've got to be realistic about this. This is a chance to move forward. The date about the utility, that was a suggestion from my friends at the Public Service Commission, that language. I'm not persuaded that the utility should have the opportunity to pick the date. I think maybe the PSC, that should be part of this proceeding to pick the date. But I'll leave it at you, Mr. Chairman. The trouble is, if we don't act now, there'll be more customers enjoying the cost shifting next time. There'll be more people that'll not want us to change. The constituency grows. And by the time that other customers finally realize the impact of this on them, it'll be too late. We'll never pass it here. So this is the time we need to do this. Thank you, sir. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the bill sponsor? Okay, I'm going to, Madam Chairman, good morning, and council, it's good to see you guys. Nice to see you. You're welcome to testify on Senate File 111, but your colleague has done a marvelous job this morning. Really hit it out of the park, I thought. But it's good to see you. Okay, so committee will close testimony. What's your pleasure on this bill? Senator Dockstader has moved the bill. Discussion. Committee, I have spent a lot of hours on this issue dating back to the days that I was chairman of this committee. I can remember one meeting, maybe as many as 5 hours over at the Liquor Commission. You remember that famous meeting that we had? And we visited with just about everybody in the county, I think. Really appreciate the passion on this issue, and I love hearing people's thoughts and dreams and everything. I'm ready to support this one, and one of the big reasons is we grandfather everybody in at this point, which I think is a real tip of the Stetson to those who are passionately involved in this now. But it stands to reason to me, committee, that we would move in the future to something that makes sense for the long term. And I trust our Public Service Commission to do that. I think they can land in a good, that doesn't mean they're going to get rid of everything that might be sent back to rooftop solar customers. I would anticipate there would still be some return on that investment. But it just stands to reason that we send this to the Public Service Commission, for me anyway. Anything else? Are you ready for?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pages of notes here. I'm seeing that those who are concerned about it are already grandfathered in, so they're protected. I'm seeing that the larger organizations are not really taking a stand on that. I noticed that rural electrics really didn't step in and don't have a concern one way or another. So I'm going with the idea that the Public Service Commission can run this through their process, make sure it's correct. Sounds like we've just added to their workload extensively if we run this through, but that's why we have a process for it. So at this point where we've got the grandfather protection, we protect the impact on our neighbors. With this move, I will be for the bill.
Okay, are you ready for a question on the bill? Question on the bill? Okay, Lily, would you please take roll on Senate File 111?
This is a roll call vote on Senate File 111, net metering revisions. Senator Boner.
No.
Senator Dockstader.
Aye.
Senator Landon.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz. Aye. Chairman Case.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes and 1 no.
Okay, Senate File 111 will go to the floor of the Senate. And welcome back, Mr. Chairman.
See, my microphone doesn't work anymore because I wore it out. We have another resolution, but I don't think we have time for it today. Is there any difficulty with people if we take this up first order of business on Wednesday? Senate Joint Resolution 4. We may have another bill or two, depending on what gets assigned. Senator Landon?
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, in the interest of transparency, there was another bill in front of us, and it was one that I brought to the Senate this year. It was the Senate File 47, the Board of Trustees Systems of Public Recreation Amendments. I have been informed that that bill actually could not be pulled on Friday because it had been referred to this committee. So Senate File 47 now belongs with the chairman, and I will be getting with him to decide what we will do with that bill. My understanding is there might be a similar bill that's being resurrected on the other side, but we will see. So I just wanted everybody to know that the chairman and I will be talking about Senate File 47.
And just by way of telegraphing things, if a person has a bill and they don't want the bill to move forward, I'm not going to schedule that bill. So it's not my decision to kill the bill. I'm just saying sponsors have a right to decide if their bill shouldn't go forward. So that Senate File 47, you're not going to see in this committee, I guess, unless you change your mind. But
that's most likely that it might not be seen again. We'll see.
And then Senate Joint Resolution 4 will take up at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning, and it will be above any other bills that may come before the committee. We've already scheduled it. I hope that's acceptable. Apologize. Appreciate everybody's attention. Thank you, committee, for your kind attention and all the members out there. All the best. We're adjourned.